Welcome back to part 2 of my Wargame tutorial for the infantry in the armory. So now I'm going to continue with the Yanked Commandos. If you haven't seen the first part, please go back and watch it. Yanked Commandos are OP, in my opinion. We've got the 5-man squads with G3A2s, which have an accuracy of 9 and a rate of fire of 180 rounds per minute, but they also come with a Milan F1. Now, Milan F1s are only good up to medium tanks because the heavy tanks obviously have higher front armor and the Milan F1s won't be as effective against them. But they have an extremely good range. 2,450 meters makes these sorts of units the really good ones for dodging around the map and sniping out medium and light vehicles, and they're extremely good at it because even though they have an accuracy of 7, which is only 35% hit chance, it's still very, very good, and it will hit a lot of their 8 missiles, and having 8 missiles is a big bonus for them. The best vehicle to bring these in is the Fullscreen, and basically the reason for this is because you get, similar to the reason you'd bring in the Dragons with the Dragon APC, you get a Milan F1 and then you get an APC with a Milan F1 on it. And you can do the similar thing that I was suggesting with the Dragon teams. You can plop the Yanked Commandos into loads of different buildings all around the map, and then you can have the Fullscreen supporting each unit in the nearby hedgerow or tree line or something. And then whenever tanks come close, you can fire at them from 2 positions, and you'll always get at least 1 shot into the side armor depending on the angles. And that can be extremely useful and very, very potent, even though the AP power is lacking in these particular Milan F1s. So, something to consider there. You can also bring them in Dorniers if you want to get them into specific situations where they can shoot into side armor. Now, we got the Jaegers. Jaegers come with the G3A2, but slightly less accurate. You can see that the G3A2 for the Yanked Commandos has 9 accuracy, but for the Jaegers only has 8 accuracy. This is to do with another hidden stat to do with different squads with the same weapons having different statistics. It's all in the thread in the description below though. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because it can get confusing, but it's basically like the fact that each unit has a different accuracy, standing still at long range, moving at long range, and moving at close quarters, and standing still at close quarters. It gets very confusing. But either way, these guys have the PS444, extremely good close range rocket. These guys are extremely good killers in forests for ambushing against enemy tanks and enemy light armor and medium armor. They can survive also against enemy infantry because of their MG3, which comes in very, very handy. But having their rifle can be what basically keeps them alive and keeps them in contention with other units that cost the same price. They only cost 10 points after all, and I would always recommend bringing them in either in the MD Jupiters to keep the cost down, or the Fullscreen just for the Fullscreen. The Fullscreens are just extremely cost effective at 80 gem vehicles, so make sure you take them if you can. The only trouble with taking them as Fullscreens is that you get much less availability. That's the main thing that you're losing there by taking the Fullscreen. So we're moving on to the Lad Javelin. The Lad Javelin is the British AA, and it has an accuracy of 10, one of the more accurate AA missiles, with a HE power of 5, which is much, much better than HE power of 3, because these guys only take 2 shots to shoot things down, rather than the 4 shots of the Hamlets that we've already covered. They have the L1A1, but it's not the best, not something they're going to have to rely on. If they do have to rely on it, then they're probably already dead. They have the very good stealth because they're a specialized unit, but they're just extremely effective against any helicopters really that come into range, and any airplanes that fly over. They only have 4 missiles though. That's probably the biggest thing you have to worry about. Make sure you keep them resupplied by a truck. Now, for these guys, I would recommend bringing them in Pinzgauers, because, to be honest, bringing them in anything else is wasting too many points. And generally, the javelins are going to be out of the way, so you're not going to need the fire support from the Saracens or the Spartans to keep them alive. Now, depending on where you're going with your deck, you can bring them in lynxes if you want to go for a marine deck where you're flying all over the map and dropping javelins everywhere, so that whenever somebody flies a plane onto the map, they just get shot down instantly. But that's really up to you, and like I said before, with there only being 4 missiles, you're not going to be able to keep them supplied if you're going to fly them far away. So be wary of that. Now we got the Kustjäger. Now these are one of the more elite units. We've got the good optics, which suggests that these guys have the 100% rate of fire buff, which basically doubles their rate of fire for their machine guns, their AT, and their machine guns. So their AK-4 has an accuracy of 12, extremely accurate gun, and it has a rate of fire of 180 rounds per minute, which is then doubled. Suppression value of 54, which matches most other good assault rifles. Then we've got the Carl Gustav. This is an accuracy, or has an accuracy of 12, which is 60% hit chance. Very, very good. AP power of 18, which makes it more effective against heavy armor than other HEAT weapons. And with the suppression of 388, it hits hard and it stuns vehicles. Now it has this squad has a strength of 15, which is 5 more than Delta Force, so you get an elite squad which has a strength of 15, which is incredibly powerful for holding positions behind enemy lines. So for that particular strategy, you want to be bringing them in the HKP 3C and flying them to places where they can disrupt enemy forces in towns. That is their main strength. The AK-4 holds its own against enemy infantry, but the CQC machine gun that they have with the rate of fire buff is extremely potent as well. So you got an accuracy of 9 with the rate of fire of 461 rounds per minute, and then doubled. So good for those sort of incursions, but can also be used as a defensive force for holding your towns rather than attacking enemy towns. Then we got the Lad blowpipe. This is another British AA unit. HE power of 3 is abysmal. 4 shots to take them down. They only have 4 missiles. Accuracy of 6, 30% hit chance, meaning only 1 or 2 of the missiles is actually going to hit. We got range versus helicopters of 2,100 meters, which is actually shorter than most of the other AAs. You've got, for instance, the Red Eye, which even has a higher range, and it does have to be guided as well, so you can't move the troops. And as soon as a plane or helicopter goes out of line of sight, the missile will fail and miss. So bear that in mind. These guys are useless. Very good cheap AA to deter units. That's what I always would use them for. For instance, if you are being attacked by helicopters at your main base, then blowpipes are extremely good for just deterring people by firing completely inaccurate AA towards them. Now, whether it hits or not doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of saying, hey, look, I've got AA here, piss off. So that's the only thing they're useful for, and never bring them in lynxes. It's not worth it. Never bring them in as Spartans, it's not worth it. Just take them in Pinsgowers. That's all you need. Then we got the Lad Red Eye. These are a little bit better because they have a higher accuracy of 7, but they still have only the HE power of 3, which means you're going to have to hit 4 times, depending on the health of the enemy aircraft or helicopter. But most enemies will have like 10 HP normally, so that's what I'm always comparing it to. Then we got the M16. Again, doesn't really matter because they only got a strength of 2. They just get taken out if they get spotted by infantry. And not one I would recommend. They cost 10 points, and they only have 1 more accuracy than a unit that costs 5 points. So, yeah, not much of a use there. They can be useful to bring in with Bradleys if you need the air cover, but to be honest, I wouldn't count on a Red Eye defending a Bradley. That just never happens. You can bring them in dragons though. That could be useful if you're going for the spam a lot, kind of control the map attack theory. Then you could space out the Lad Red Eyes and the M113 dragons and kind of just like swamp the enemy from all sides with AA and HGMs. But it's not as useful as having separate HGM or AA vehicles covering loads of HGMs. Then we got the Lad Stinger. Now we're talking about serious AA. We got the highest accuracy, I believe, on the Stinger of 11, and we got HE power of 5, so a much better choice. Stingers are incredibly useful. Bring them in M35s because you don't need the vehicles to support. Unless you're struggling for deck slots and you need a place to bring in your Bradleys or your M113 Dragons, then you can do so. But otherwise, just bring them in M35s, get a higher availability. Don't bring them in Humvees. Humvees are just useless. But the Stinger's definitely a recommended infantry AA unit if you're looking for one. Don't count on the assault rifle though, make sure they're defended. Now we're moving on to the Legion. The Legion are one of the better French units. They come with a FAMAS with an accuracy of 9, a suppression value of 39, and a rate of fire of 255 rounds per minute, which is reasonable. But we've got the LRAC, which has an accuracy of 14, which is a HEAT weapon with an accuracy of 14. That is 70% hit chance at max range, with an AP power of 16, with a suppression of 388. So it's not only likely to hit, it will be likely to stun, and it can hurt. Medium light armor can basically just blow them out of the ground, and the heavy armor can take shots of this in the side and be very hurt as well. The only thing that lets the Legion down is the CQC weapon, but you've got to remember that I believe the Legion are actually the French elite units. Although they don't have the optics, I think they get a buff to their rate of fire as well. So it's probably the only unit without good optics that does get a buff to its rate of fire. So something to think about with the Legion. Now, I would recommend bringing in Legion in VABs because you don't want to lose a squad of Legion by getting your trucks shot up. Whereas a VAB will not only travel fast like a truck, it will keep your troops armoured. Now, don't count on it defending itself against enemy AT, so make sure you drop them out before you get in range of enemies. Otherwise, you're just going to lose too many points. Or send in sponge units first, like cheap 5-point units, and then send in the Legion afterwards to clear up. Then we've got the Live Garden. These have the GVM75 with an accuracy of 9. and they also have access to the Gustav with an MG3. So these are again another good infantry unit, similar to the Legion, a very good AT weapon. Slightly varies though, because the Gustav has more AP power but less accuracy than the Legion's AT weapon. But I would much prefer to have an MG3. The difference here is that the Legion are better at close quarters combat. The Livgarden are more of the sort of troops that you use in forests. So Legion are good for towns, Livgarden are good for forests and shooting at a defensive range from towns. So basically most infantry is really good at defense with a machine gun or like with an MG3. But if you're letting them get close and they're flooding your town, then troops like the Legion will do a lot better because of their CQC machine gun. Then we've got the Moors. Now basically these troops are only useful for their AT weapons. Their C1 SMG is nothing to rely on. They only have a strength of 5, but they do have the Gustav. So if for instance you wanted to use Legion and you mix them with the Moors, then not only would you have AT that can deal with light and medium armor, you'd also have the Gustav, which can damage slightly heavy armor, and that can be extremely useful and decent in a larger town, for instance. But otherwise, not a recommended unit. If you really need those AT units for defending the centers of towns, then these are what they're good for. Else, they're useless for anywhere else. Bring them in M35s, you don't need the APCs really to protect them. You got the ATGM Milan for the British. You got the Milan F1 system with the L1A1, basically the same as the French version. Strength of 2, don't get them caught out. Same sort of thing with the Lynx AH1 though. If you want to use them to catch out the enemies by a marine deck, then feel free to fly them around the map and drop them off. Just be wary that they run out of ammo reasonably quickly with a rate of fire of 30 rounds per minute. They use up those 6 missiles very, very quickly, so make sure they have supply. Then we've got the Panzer Skyty. These come with an AK-4, which has an accuracy of 8, suppression of 54, and a rate of fire of 180 rounds per minute. The Miniman AT rocket has an accuracy of 6 and AP power of 14. A reasonably good AT weapon for those light and medium vehicles, but the accuracy of 6 is kind of shocking. You're only going to hit in 2 out of those 6 rockets. Then we've got the KSP M58B machine gun. Not great, but decent, cheap defensive troops if you need them. The reason I would bring these in though is to make use of the PBV, which is one of the Swedish APCs. Very, very effective. Comes with a 20mm autocannon, which can be great for defending specific positions. Also the STRF at close range with the kinetic Bofors rounds can do huge amounts of damage. So definitely a good one for either holding forests or holding towns, if you bring them in the APCs, that is. Then we've got the Panzer Grenadiers. These have an accuracy of 9, a HE power of 1, and a rate of fire of 180 rounds per minute. They come with the good PZF-44 AT weapon, which has an accuracy of 12, but only a AP power of 4. These are great for bringing in with the Marders if you want to save deck spaces with vehicles. Marders are just such good vehicles in general. I will go into them when I get to the vehicles more, but basically that is the only reason I would ever bring in the Panzer Grenadiers. Panzer Grenadiers are in general good at defending, and also good at attacking because they have the CQC version of the MG3, which is extremely powerful, and also the G3A2 with a accuracy of 9. So these troops will hold their own close range, and they will also be able to take care of those pesky light and medium vehicles that will be supporting enemy troops. Furthermore, with specific Marders, you get a decent HGM to help you out versus maybe heavier targets. If, for instance, with the Marder 1A3, you can get the Milan F2. It costs 45 points for the Marder 1A3, but sometimes that Milan F2 on that tank will help you out greatly. Now we've got the paratroopers. They come with the Sterling machine gun. This has an accuracy of 8, a suppression value of 39, and a rate of fire of 255 rounds per minute. They have access to the Carl Gustav and the L7A1 machine gun, which has 461 rounds per minute. Decent for basically taking over enemy towns, but not great for taking them. Good for holding them, not good for taking them. Decent defensive troops, basically. And only good if you're going to bring them in lynxes at the beginning of a match to defend a specific position. Else they're going to get taken out very easily by defensive troops because the L7A1 with its low rate of fire isn't very good, and the Sterling machine gun at close range is equally as bad. So definitely just defensive troops. The PVG RP, probably the most overpowered AT weapon in the game, except for the fact that it has a shorter range than most HGMs. So they have the Capist M45B submachine gun, which has an accuracy of 6 and a rate of fire of 255 rounds per minute and suppression of 39. Not the thing you're going to be worried about with these particular units though. The thing that makes these guys really good is their HGM with the RBS 56. Has a range of 2,275 meters, which is a little bit shorter than the Milans, but has accuracy of 10 and an AP power of 26, which I believe is the highest AP power of any HGM weapon that you can get. Suppression value of 150, and of course the rate of fire is the same as everything else. So the most damaging HGM unit, but the accuracy with an accuracy of 10, which is a 50% hit chance, 4 of those 8 missiles is going to hit. And the good thing about these guys is that if you're preparing an ambush, for example, these guys can be extremely effective because normally HGMs would give away your positions before your tanks get in range. Whereas if you're playing defensive with tanks, for instance, then you can use these because they will fire at the same range as higher tier tanks, which allows you to catch out the enemy a lot harder than normal. Now, if you're going to bring these in, you can either bring them in the TGBs if you know that they're going to be safe, or you can bring them in the PBV 302. Now, you have to be playing a Swedish specific deck to get a hold of the STRF, but the PBV is good for not only keeping this unit alive for getting it to the front line, but after you drop off the HGM unit, you can use these separately. So that's always something to consider. Next we have the RBS 70. This is an AA unit, uses the same model missile launcher as the PVGs, except from it's for anti-air instead of AT. It has a range versus helicopters which is very large, 2,450 meters, and a range versus airplanes of 1,960 meters. Now it has an accuracy of 9, which is 1 less than the Javelin and 2 less than the Stinger, and it has matches with HE power of 5, so it can two-shot those pesky helicopters, and of course the rate of fire stays the same. Now these are decent troops to be dotting around, but they do cost a lot, which makes them less preferable to Stingers. Now if you are going to be using these, make sure if you're going to keep them safe, then bring them in M621s, else bring them in their armoured vehicle, the Sisu XA180. Bringing them in the NM113s is also an option, but don't bring them in the second version unless you really want that kinetic cannon. Now we've got the LGP or LVG RP. This is basically the same unit, just with a different assault rifle. You also get access to the PBV if you want to use that. Then we got the Rema, which is a AT or a infantry with AT unit for the French. They have an accuracy of 8 and suppression value of 54 and a rate of fire of 225 rounds per minute. These guys are decent because of their AT weapon, but their machine gun really lacks. And for their price, I wouldn't say they're worth it. They're like on par with most 10-point units and not much more, although their AT weapon is a little bit better. So not a unit I would recommend, but you can bring them in if you want to bring them in Pumas. They can be useful for incursions behind enemy lines. Now we've got the Royal Marines. These are the British Special Forces. They have the good optics, and that means that they have the rate of fire buff of 100%. They have the L1A1 SLR, which has an accuracy of 10, so that's decent. We got the Carl Gustav on these guys, which makes them better than the Delta Force in my opinion. But then we've got the Bren. Now, sometimes I wish they didn't have the Bren, but the Bren's like a classic machine gun, I guess, for the British. And it only has a 461 round rate of fire of rounds, 461 rounds per minute, which kind of lets it down, but with the rate of fire buff is decent, and of course the accuracy is 9, so it can hold its own. And I prefer this unit over the Delta Force any day, although the Delta Force do have a better machine gun in my opinion. But the reason I'd take the Royal Marines is not only do they have the Bren L4, which is a CQC machine gun, but they have that better AT weapon as well, which makes them good for defending behind enemy lines. Now we've got the Reservists. These guys come with rifles, the MAS 4956, accuracy of 8, 54 suppression, a rate of fire of 144 rounds per minute. They have the Sarpak AT weapon, pretty much an abysmal AT weapon. Accuracy of 8 isn't too bad, but the AP power of 12 is kind of god-awful. Only really going to be taking out those light infantry units, light infantry APCs and so on. The medium units is going to be struggling to take out, and heavy units is going to have no chance. The only thing that makes these good is the fact that they're cheap, but there are better cheap units. For example, the Home Guard for the Danish. Now we got the Rifleman. We're getting into the longer range machine gun now. We got the M16 Assault Rifle with the accuracy of 7, suppression of 39, rate of fire of 255 rounds per minute. You got the M72 AT launcher, but you got the M60, which has the longest range of any MG at a 1050 meters. And this can be extremely useful for defensive positions. That's what riflemen are extremely good for. But other than that, the M60 only has an accuracy of 6, which actually is lacking compared to other 8 MG weapons. But the rate of fire is still 923, so it pretty much doubles most of the more accurate MG weapons other than the MG3. But the accuracy is less. So that's the trade you're making there. Really, really good defensive troops though, the riflemen, and you can bring them in tons of different units. For example, the M113 Dragons are a good choice, and you can also bring them in with Hueys to plop them into towns around the map. That can also be very useful as well. Then we got the Sapeurs. These are a 10-man flame squad. Not great. I went over these in the last part. Then we've got the light riflemen. The light riflemen have the original dragons. They have a 10-man squad though, and an M6. They have the M16s with an accuracy of 7, suppression of 39, and rate of fire of 255 rounds per minute. They have a M240 as their machine gun, which has an accuracy of 8, but only a rate of fire of 461 rounds per minute. And the dragon has an accuracy of 7 and an AP power of 8, which is not very good at all. You're going to be taking out light vehicles, but nothing else. Not even damaging medium vehicles in the side armor. That's going to be pretty depressing using the dragon. Light riflemen, definitely not something I would recommend. Moving on to stormers. These are similar, very similar to the paratroopers in that they have a decent main weapon, the AG3, with an accuracy of 9 and a rate of fire 180 rounds per minute and 54 suppression. They have the Carl Gustav, the good AT weapon, but they have the close quarters MG3, which makes them extremely good for attacking into towns. So make sure that they have the defense to do so, which is where the Saisu XA180 comes in handy, or the M113s. But I would recommend the Saisu because it has a faster speed and also more armor. Then we got US Marines. These also come with the long range M60, but their M60 is a little bit more accurate than the other one that I've already mentioned, with an accuracy of 7. We got the rate of fire of 923 rounds per minute. The M16 that they carry has an accuracy of 9 and the same suppression rate of fire, and they of course have the M72. Now these guys are decent because they have a 15-man squad, and their machine gun is very useful for defensive positions. Not great for attacking because their M60 is useless, and the M16 kind of gets outshone by other units with different weapons. Also, the M72 is more of a defensive AT weapon, I would say, because although it's decent in its own way, the accuracy of 6 isn't going to make it too reliable at max range. Now we got the Vandus. They have the C1A1 SLR, which has an accuracy of 9. They got the Carl Gustav and the C2A1 close quarters machine gun. Now these guys are decent. They're very similar to the Stormers and the paratroopers, but they're Canadian, and basically if you want to bring them in, I would recommend bringing them in the M35. They're more of a good defensive troops, or if you want to attack with them, you can bring them in with the M113. I always found the Grizzly too expensive, even though it's very, very fast. But 15 points, I wouldn't say it was worth it. You can also bring them in CH118s if you want to put them into flanking positions or take over towns. They can also be useful for that. Then finally, we got the blowpipes, exactly the same armament as the British version, just a different assault rifle. And with that, that is every single infantry unit on the NATO side. I basically did all of this in one entire run. I went through every single infantry unit separately and tried to point out where it can be used and what units are preferable to bring in which particular vehicles. Now, because I've been doing this for so long, my voice is actually starting to go. I'm actually starting to get a bit of a sore throat and actually not going to be able to talk anymore because the recording is about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now, it's going to be split up into 2 parts because of this. And hopefully, if you're listening to this now, then you're on the second part. So thanks for watching through it all. Hopefully you got a good idea of every single infantry unit on the NATO side. Next videos will be the packed units, the packed infantry. Going to do exactly the same thing once my voice recovers. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope this was useful. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll leave all of my information about all hidden stats and stuff in the description. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.